This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this!
Welcome to the X-Cast. I'm your host, Sarah Blair, and the truth is in here, under the bed, and it's hungry. I'd like to welcome friend of the cast, Karin Konoval, back to the show. Hi, Karin.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you today?
I'm great, thanks.
Excellent. So you're here to give us a little bit of an extra glimpse into one of the more infamous episodes of The X-Files, which is the episode of Home, where you portrayed Mrs. Peacock. So it's a well-loved episode by pretty much all of the fans, I think. It's one of those episodes that everybody has a strong opinion about. They either love it or they're terrified by it, or one way or the other.
Or both, as
yes,
I've heard
both.
over the years.
Yes.
I'm still amazed at the impact it made, so many years ago, and that it seems to have had memorable legs in the sense that people have continued to think about it and stuff like that. It's quite neat to have been part of something that became iconic like that.
Absolutely, and iconic, infamous.
Yeah.
Do you think infamous is a fair description for this episode?
I think that's a pretty fair description. I remember, after it first aired, and for about the next, it hasn't stopped to this day, I should be quite honest about this, is if somebody had seen it and was a fan of the show, and if they said to somebody else, oh, you remember that X-Files episode, Home, Karin plays, Mrs. Peacock, the woman under the bed, and literally the reaction from people over the years has been just to shriek, like scream. And so scream in a sort of an infamous way, where they just seem to have a spontaneous reaction that is just like shrieking, and it's been quite funny to me, and that really hasn't stopped over the years. So it is quite funny.
Yeah. So, I mean, this episode was aired one time on Fox, and then it was banned from the network and didn't air on network television again for quite a while, and I think it first aired again on FX. How does it feel to you to be in a piece of work that was so infamous and like this? Like, how did that affect you at all, or was it exciting or scary or what?
Well, it more just sort of made me shake my head, like, really? Like, when they wouldn't air it again. I mean, personally, and as many fans of the X-Files know, or at least the ones that I've spoken to about this, when I watched the airing of the first episode, I actually watched it with, I had the script in front of me, and I covered my eyes whenever I knew there was going to be a gory bit, because I don't terribly much like gory stuff, so I didn't actually even see the entire episode without my hands over my eyes at certain points until we were at X-Fest, the fan convention in Illinois last February, and I first saw the episode from beginning to end with about 800 X-Files fans, which was an amazing experience.
Yes.
And finally watched it with my hands off my eyes. So it's even seeing it then, I went, wow, really? This was banned? I know there's, but I think it had more to do with the, some of the things discussed within the episode, or some of the things underlying it, more than in terms of anything extraordinarily gory or anything like that, because there's tons of gory stuff out there, and this was not exceptionally gory in any particular way. It probably just some of the themes and things that were being discussed within it is probably what got people going. So I've always just been quite bemused at that and gone, wow, that's sort of amazing. It's just amazing. And I remember when I first I never met Glenn Morgan at the time, but it was probably about 7 or 8 years later, we met for the first time. I was auditioning for another project of his, and the two of us both just giggled. We said hello and we shook hands and we hugged, and then we giggled because it was so amazing to have been, introduced to each other through both being, a part of such a infamous thing. And so I think, I have no idea what Glenn thinks of it this many years later and stuff, but having seen it again last year at XFest, I realized that this is an incredibly fine piece of work, of which I am a very small part of it. It's sort of a special effects sort of part of it, but the piece as a whole, when I saw it afresh, I went, wow, this is an amazing short film. It's a very fine science fiction film, this episode. So I don't know about I'm not quite sure why it went to such a place of infamy in terms of people being upset by it, but I certainly get the respect for it as a fine piece of science fiction film work. It's quite brilliant. And as I say, when I saw it again too, I went, I am such a small part of this. The role I have in it is significant, but it's small, and there's just beautiful work from everybody throughout the episode.
Yes, I agree with that, absolutely. And do you recall your impressions at all when you first read the script for it? Were you only reading, for your part? How did that come about when you were cast?
I think that I was probably just given the sides for part of Mrs. Peacock's role, or all of it. I can't actually remember for sure. So I wouldn't have read the entire script until I was cast, and I wasn't immediately cast. I had an audition and then 3 callbacks for the role. And so over the course of a week, I think I went to an audition on one day, and then 2 days later I was called back, and then I was called back again, and each time I got notes from that were coming down either from, I don't know whether they were coming from Chris Carter or from Kim Manners or other people involved, or from Glenn, I have no idea. And I get just refining, I guess, what I was doing with what I was doing in my audition portrayal of Mrs. Peacock. So I do remember the impression I do remember is going, when I first got the sides for the character, going, how on earth do you audition for a character with no arms and no legs who lives under a bed? What do you do? What do you wear? And as I have over the years, whenever I'm confronted by a character that's so outside the box, I just sort of put on black spandex and wear no makeup and pull my hair back, and that's what I did, because it's like you can't dress for this. What are you going to do? So yeah, I remember, I literally would just wear black, pull your hair back, no makeup, go in there. And mostly, I went immediately to the place as an actor of going, well, how do I, where do I find the energy of this character? And I thought about what it would be like if all you really had to express yourself with was basically your torso, and you're probably, she's sort of strapped down on something. So I kind of found and she's obviously a character with huge passion and commitment to her sons and to their way of life, very protective. She's really got something to protect here, fiercely, and she's a survivor. So there's that, and it's all on the page. I didn't have to go looking beyond the page, what was written in the script, to find that. But then how to find that physically in my body, and I found myself at each audition just sort of going and sitting in a corner by a wall before I would go into the audition room, and then finding sort of the impulse for Mrs. Peacock, the sensation of Mrs. Peacock, sort of deep in my chest area, and where could I get a hold of a sense of her as a character? I know that may sound a bit, maybe not flaky, but that's kind of the way I'll work with things, is once I can feel the sensation of a character within me, then I can portray them. And actually, her voice came from that. So, and what's kind of funny is over the years, people will go, "I'm hungry," or that's been her, that's been sort of that voice I found for her, and that particular phrase, "I'm hungry," has been over the years. It's people have had great fun with it, and I know have quite enjoyed the phrase as sort of that's iconic Mrs. Peacock. And funnily enough, that was the exact phrase that was my mantra in the auditions for the role. Is I would sit on the ground in my black spandex with my hair pulled back in a corner before going in for each, callback, and find that sensation of Mrs. Peacock, and then repeat, "I'm hungry," as a mantra to sort of enter into the character, which is what I did throughout the filming as well. So that those two words were sort of like the first ones that resonated for me out of all the things that she says, and that I hung onto as my character mantra throughout, and like where her voice came from to produce that sound. And so as obviously I can still call it back like right now, because the sensation was that specific. And once I'd found it, then I just kept that with me throughout.
Yes, I have to admit that's the one line that I repeat from the entire series, probably the most often.
Isn't that goofy too? Hey, like,
it's
isn't
amazing.
that like, who would have known if I had known that sitting outside, the audition rooms up at North Shore Studios 25 years ago, whatever it was, that as I was sitting on the ground repeating this to myself just to sort of anchor myself in the character, that this would turn out to be the phrase that everybody would have fun with for the next quarter century. I mean, it's goofy. It's fun.
Right? It's so fun, and you just never know what things are going to lead to, right? It's kind of incredible. And so I mean, clearly you did not envision this at the time, but yeah, that's pretty amazing. Once you got the part and you were cast, what was kind of the next step about becoming Mrs. Peacock? With you had lots of special effects to deal with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
They were very specific special effects, and contrary to what a lot of people think, there actually wasn't a great deal of makeup at all. The most complicated thing they had to do, and things were done differently at that time, is what they did was, and this was tough for me, is in order to hide my body, except for a part of my torso, they built me an exact tight-fitting, basically coffin box that I was slid into. Toby Lindella crafted a sort of a lower torso for me that extended from my own, and then what was left of Mrs. Peacock's arms and legs were prosthetic entities that functioned on wires that sort of ran through the box and were operated by other people when they were seen. So it was kind of complicated, but basically, like, my body had to be disappeared. So I had to be fitted like for this coffin box, and this was extraordinarily. I have claustrophobia anyways, but this was extraordinarily claustrophobic to be slid into something that, and especially because it all had to have all the wires like through it so that people could operate her limbs. Like once I was in, there weren't no getting out for hours.
Oh my goodness!
So it was, and then to be under that bed, which was, the actual height of a bed. It wasn't like some, theatrically staged bed. I was under there with a mattress springs right at my nose, and it was a couple of the being under the bed stuff, when I was actually under the bed was some of the toughest. I really had to take deep breaths and be very calm being under there. It was pretty terrifying. So they had to build this sort of boxy thing, and then for my face, I'd never done a prosthetic head casting before, which is a very interesting experience. Yeah. I've since done probably 3 or 4 others, and that also is not for the faint of heart or the claustrophobic.
Oh my goodness!
Because what that involved at the time, and I think probably generally still does, is you have to basically sit while a sort of a clay plaster is poured all over your head and down your shoulders, and it has to stay on you. And at the time, I think Toby did put straws up my nose so I could breathe through the straws, but it has to stay on you until it seals, which is about 40 minutes. And they can't get, what I didn't know at the time, though I did by the time I did the next prosthetic role with this head casting, was they can't get you out until the clay hardens. Like, it's not like once they pour it on you, you go, oh, now I'm having a panic attack, they get it off you. They can't do that. It's got to harden first. So luckily I didn't know that the first time around. But anyway, so they did do a head casting so that they could then build the small prosthetic pieces that went across my one cheek and stuff. But it really was, it was a very specific makeup. There's really no makeup on my face except for what blends that prosthetic over the side of the face in. And then I had a teeth fitting, and there were these, like a set of really ugly dentures made for me for Mrs. Peacock's teeth.
Do you still have those?
Yes, I do, and I don't know where they are, but it was the only thing I kept. Toby let me keep those, but it's actually one of the only, I don't know in terms of anything I've ever done. Mrs. Peacock's teeth are, I think, one of only maybe 3 mementos from any show I've ever done that I've kept.
That's great.
I don't actually know where they are right now, but they're here somewhere. That was that was pretty much the full extent of the prosthetic preparation. And then, so like when I was in the box, then we had to practice, like I had to be able to gesture with my shoulders. Like if I moved the shoulders, it would have to, almost like you're puppeteering in a way. So that would motivate the movement of an arm limb or something like that. And I remember, so it required really good stomach muscles because I was, and really good diaphragm strength as well, because everything was, I had to be able to exercise that muscle over and over and over again to be able to, because that's the way she would express herself, Mrs. Peacock. So it was sort of a tandem thing going on, like when they pulled me out from under the bed. When I was under the bed and the light was just on my eye under there and stuff like that, then obviously that wasn't required, though I was still in the box.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you were actually controlling the arms and legs yourself. There wasn't somebody beside.
Yeah, no, there was somebody at the other who had, as I recall, there was like green screen wires that went out through the other end of the box, and they would do that in response to, or sort of in tandem with, like if I went, my left or my right shoulder pulsed one way or another, I wanted to express something, then we kind of worked together, almost like a, double puppeteering that way.
Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was a little, it was interestingly complicated in a way, but also quite beautifully simple.
Right.
There wasn't any huge complication to it. It was just figuring out how to do this, and then luckily I have quite a large movement background, so working with something like this, we found the way to do this.
That's
together.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's teamwork. That's the greatest part of teamwork.
and that's what we were like on set too, me and the special effects team, because I'd be in, I'd go into the effects trailer in the morning to get the prosthetic on and that kind of thing, and then this oversuit body would go on me, and then there would be the wires that were attached and la 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 la, and then go into the box like that, and so pretty much I just walked around with the team of 3 or 4 people throughout all of filming.
Oh my goodness.
And nobody really wanted to be anywhere near us. I remember the day we did the birthing of the baby thing or whatever, and that wasn't one of the first things we did. It was later on, I remember, and I was a bloody yucky mess, the wardrobe and everything. And I remember going for lunch, and nobody wanted to come and sit with us. Matter of fact, I don't even think anybody wanted to eat lunch that day. Everybody just looked. So, everybody was just like, so we were like a bit of a, me and the special effects team were like a little pariah walking around. Not that people were unpleasant, but you know what I mean?
Right,
it's like,
yeah,
no.
Of course.
I think everybody was kind of grossed out.
Yeah, probably about the same as the fluke man, huh? Yeah, so that's quite an incredible experience. What were your filming days like? How many days do you think it took to capture all that?
I'm not sure. I think because once again, like my role is specific and small in the larger thing, but I'm thinking maybe it was like 5 days, maybe like 4 or 5 days, like long ones, but it was like 4 or 5 days of filming, and there would have been 3, 4 or 5 days of like the fittings and figuring stuff out and how are we going to make this work in advance of that. But I don't think it was more than 4 or 5 days in total I was on. It was probably more like 4,
Okay, yeah, it probably felt like 5 years having to be under that bed.
well, for the one particular day,
yeah.
The one particular day where I was under it for most of the day, and I think maybe it was just the first day that I was under it, and when I realized. And when they first put me in the box, and then it was like, okay, I can kind of do this. This isn't great, but now we go under the bed. And I remember I had a really hard time because they'd also put put blood shots into my eyes, and then they filled the room with smoke, and there was a little pin light to be able to pick up, the light in my eyes under the bed, that it was attached to the bottom of the mattress. And I remember getting under there, and then there was a sound man still in the room with a boom, but it was all dark and smoky, and I was under there, and I think I may have just almost started to cry. And then I remember, coming out at one point, and Kim Manners coming in and going, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't realize the bed would be like this." He went, "Well, what did you think it was going to be? It's, she lives under a bed. Did you think it was like, And I was like, "No, it's okay." So pretty much, I've often said over the years that, when Mrs. Peacock gets pulled out and she's screaming like crazy, I was screaming like crazy. Pretty much that's Karin expressing an enormous, like all the terror it felt to film this episode under there.
Oh, wow.
Which is probably why. So I have thought that, like whatever I released in those howls and screams is the terror that's inside there is it's definitely tinged with Karin's terror of being under the bed and trapped there.
Oh my goodness!
So it's no wonder it scared the willies out of people.
Absolutely, it was certainly effective. So I'm not sure that's the kind of method acting anybody really wants to experience, but it's effective at least.
No. But then you do it and it's done. It's not like I was in danger at any point. No one was torturing me or anything. It was just, it required a certain level of a certain kind of focus to get through that. And, obviously I'm really glad that I did it, because what an interesting role of it, ultimately. And, we get all kinds of challenges as actors that sometimes are, scarier than others. And if you manage to transcend it and deliver good work on the other side of it, then that's always a good feeling. That's like, oh, cool. All right. Excellent. Good. We did that one.
It definitely adds to the accomplishment, I think. How was it getting to work with Kim Manners? He's quite an incredible X-Files director, one of the legends.
Well, wonderful. I mean, it was, throughout, it was like any direction that he had. I don't remember things in detail. I just remember a feeling of obviously feeling really honored to be working with him, and his clarity in character and storytelling was beautiful to work with. That's something I love very much, and I remember him as a lovely gentleman as well. Like it was a very gracious set. It was a very, very gracious set.
Awesome. And one of my favorite looks in this scene, in the episode, comes from David Duchovny when, Mrs. Peacock, when you're rolled out from under that bed, and he just has this most horrible look on his face of just complete horror. And I think it kind of mirrors the way my face looks when I'm watching. But, it's really a horrific thing. And how was it doing those scenes with David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson?
It was great. It was quite wonderful. Like, it was just, that was all great. I was inside the character I was in, and they were inside the character they were in. So it's not like we spent any time chatting or anything, So we did this stuff, and it was wonderful working with them both. The same as it was working with them again last year, like almost 20 years later. And funnily enough, I have to say that in the characters that when we were working in Plus One last year, obviously I had like characters who were much more fun to play. It was just a hoot to play Chucky and Judy. And I remember when I think the first day of filming with David, one of our Chucky and Mulder scenes, he said, "Wow, it's so amazing to see you like with 2 arms and 2 legs, and I don't think I've ever seen you walk before." Yeah. And then of course, but here I wasn't. He said, but he said something like he was still wondering what I looked like, because there I was as Chucky. So. And then, of course, when we did a Judy, I said, you'll get to see a little bit more of what I actually look like in a few days when I'm playing Judy. So, because I think we started with Chucky scenes, and then we went to Judy after that, like Judy in the hospital scene. So that was quite fun. So what's more resonant in my mind right now is having had the opportunity to work with David and Jillian last year on Plus One, and how much fun that was to be able to work together as like actors, like all standing up and talking and not being under a bed.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I'm sure nobody could have really predicted that 25 years later, here we are. With all this, it's kind of amazing and wonderful, and so quite an experience. So so what other projects have you got going on now that we've wrapped up the X-Files for now? Do we know, like, is it gonna be it, or you never know? We couldn't.
Who knows?
Guess.
I mean, that's up to Chris, isn't it?
Right? Yeah.
And frankly, whatever, anything that, if Chris Carter wanted me to do anything in the future, I would be there in a second. The same with Glenn Morgan. These are, I call them the magic men. They're just so beautiful, and I've had many opportunities to work with Glenn over the years since then, or on projects that Glenn was had either written or was executive producer of, or or as a director. I would love to work with him as a director again. Anyway, so I have no clue about what the future, if there is any future for the X-Files, but anything that those gentlemen would do, I would be there in a heartbeat. But for myself right now, I'm actually, at the moment, I've got recurring roles on 2 series at the moment, so I'm sort of filming them in tandem, and the scheduling can get interesting. I have, and I'm not allowed to say too much about them, but anyway, I have a lovely recurring role on the series Snowpiercer, which will come out on TNT next June, I think. So I've got a recurring role through their first season. That's a really, I love this character very much. There's a certain level of whimsy to this character that I play through season 1 of Snowpiercer, and so I'm really enjoying that. And now I'm also carrying a recurring role on The Good Doctor that I just started doing. So I've filmed 2 episodes of that, and I'm about to, in a couple of weeks, we'll start my 3rd episode on Good Doctor. So I can't really speak to the characters on either show yet, but it's interesting. They're both sort of in the medical realm, which is quite funny. Yeah, so
I did get to see you on Take 2 also. I'm really enjoying that show. That was
cool.
A fun character. I saw you when you popped up. So,
I really enjoyed playing. That was what was her name? The character. It was that was a really fun character to play. I confess I haven't actually seen Take 2 yet, so but I loved playing that. I loved playing that character, even though it was was just briefly on for the 1 episode at this point. But that was a great cougarish sort of. Yes. I don't know. That was really, really fun. So that's sort of what's going on at the moment.
Awesome.
Oh, and I did play, actually, one other thing I did do this year was that, which will be coming up next spring, but I can't speak about that yet either, is I did step my toe back into the world of primates and had a brief role as a gorilla on an upcoming film. Very brief, but not an orangutan, but as a gorilla. So that was kind of fun to play a gorilla and instead of an orangutan.
A different part of the ape family, huh? That's
exactly.
Exciting. Yeah. Well, we sure do very much appreciate you stopping in. Is there any upcoming appearances you might have? Like, I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know any about negotiations or anything like that, but is there a chance you might come back to X-Fest too?
I think that's a good inquiry for the folks at X-Fest.
Just had to ask.
I'm certainly not saying that I'm not going to be there, but I think that you better ask the folks at X-Fest.
Yes, we're definitely going to.
I think they can probably answer that question pretty easily right now, but I'll leave it to them to answer that question.
Well, we don't want to have any spoilers, so
we don't want to spoil anything that X-Fest themselves might like to say.
Absolutely. Well, we hope to see you there, and. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a insight into the season 4 episode Home. It was a lot of fun delving into that and getting a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff on there. So we should appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely, Sarah. It's a delight to talk to you.
All right. Thanks. And as always, remember, folks, you can't keep a peacock down.
I'm hungry.
The Xcast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and hosted by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated team of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find the show on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, or inside our group, the X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, plus on Instagram by typing in the XFcast. If you're a fan of the show, why not support us on Patreon? Exclusive bonus episodes, early access to new episodes, plus become part of our Xcast community in the Patreon department. To see our monthly subscription options, just head to patreon.com/the Xcast. That's patreon.com/the Xcast. We'd love to see you join our Patreon community. We're also part of the We Made This podcast network at We Made This Pod on Twitter and We Made This on Facebook. You can find a range of shows on TV, film, music and popular culture in general on the network. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.